Welcome to another video on Flight Simulator 2020. Today we are going to do a flight with takeoff, navigation and approach using IFR, instrument flight radio, to get our bearings to the destination, and ILS, instrument landing system, to have an automatic approach. We are going to fly on the Canary Islands here on the west coast of Africa, and we set our departure from Fuerteventura, our arrival at Lanzarote, and we are going to do a low altitude airways flight with an ILS approach, let's say this one, where you can see that in the flight planning we'll fly straight to Lanzarote, and then we will have to do a flight of a triangle to have a final approach on the landing area. So let's go and fly.
Fuerteventura Tower, Pure Simulator 7787, ready to go runway 19 IFR to Lanzarote.
So here we are in the Airbus. First thing that we will do before takeoff is throttle our engines a little bit to 34%, put off the parking brake, which is here, and then we'll put the thrust to flex, auto thrust, and we are ready to take off. As you can see on the main flight display, the altitude display in the center, we almost reached 140 knots. At 150 knots we can lift the nose and take off, which we do right now. Now I know that our flight will be in a heading of north, so I'll put the airplane already in a turn so that we can head north. This is the time to put the gears up.
7787, contact Cannary Center on 119.3.
IFR contacted us. We have to acknowledge handoff.
119.3 for Pure Simulator 7787.
Thrust control goes to climb automatic. This will allow the airplane, the fly-by-wire system, to automatically set the speed and trim the ailerons for a good flight. Now we got a warning that we have to maintain under 231 knots. So here on the speed selector I will put a manual entry of 250 knots. Seems okay, and engage is by clicking there. We put on the autopilot, and before we forget, let's retract the flaps and disengage the speed leveler. Now, to have an idea where we are heading to, let's pull up the VFR map, and as you see, we are making our turn here so that we can align with the flight plan. This can also be seen on the navigation display. If I put the navigation display to planning and zoom out a little bit, then you can see the flight plan here. We actually are going from GCFV to I can't read it, but this is the destination airport. This is the path that we are going to follow. Being in autopilot, we will automatically follow this path. So maybe now is a good time to already do some preliminary preparations of the flight computer. We have here the MCU, the multi-purpose control and display unit, and we will want to enter some information so that the flight computer can plan our approach when we land. So I'll click on the perf button here and go to next phase, next phase. This is information that we want to enter. We want to know the wind speed and the wind direction. When we want to know the QNH, that's the barometric pressure at the destination airport. But we'll wait for the IFR radio to give us this information. So let's tune in to the Canary's center and contact them.
Cannary Center, Pearson number 7787 is at 5,000 feet, descending 3,000 feet.
Pearson number 7787 Cannary Center, continue as planned. Altimeter 29.902.
So they gave us the
Pearson number
altimeter.
7787 climb and maintain 5,000 feet.
So as you can see here on the main display, we are at about 5,000 feet, so that's okay. Let's acknowledge the instruction. And they
Climb
gave
and maintain 5,000 feet, Pearson number 7787.
They gave us the barometric pressure, which is 29.9, so I'll enter that in the system, 29.92, and that has to be entered in the QNH here at top. This has also to be displayed here, and as it is 29.92. That's the barometric pressure that will help calibrate the altitude meter of our airplane. So all we have to do now is, as you can see on the
Pearson number
IFR,
7787 contact Canary's approach on 129.3.
IFR is there again, and they want us to contact
129.3, Pearson number 7787.
So we tune into the approach so that we can get further instructions from that.
Canary's approach, Pearson number 7787, 5,000 feet.
Pearson number 7787 Canary's approach, continue as planned. Altimeter 29.902.
The altimeter 29.902, we have already entered this in the MCDU. So now we have time to have a look where we're flying. So the islands, I can spot them to the left. We are flying through the clouds actually. Let's have an outside view of our plane. So we are leaving the Lanzarotte and we're heading for Fuerteventura. For the flight planning, we can already start to plan our approach. As you can see on the VFR map, we are halfway to our approach area. If we have a look at the navigation display, we can engage the constraints here.
Pearson number 7787, you are 17 miles southwest. Keep speed below 220 knots. Expect ILS Yankee runway to reapproach via Lima Zulu transition. Clear to Lima Zulu.
So by enabling this constraints button on the instrument panel, you can see that we get altitudes, expected altitudes at certain waypoints. Now the altitude that we will have when we take a left here at the end of this line is 5,000, which we have now. But I want to know the altitude next, so let me zoom in or zoom out, and I see here for the waypoint USR we will have to have an altitude of 2,500.
Pearson number 7787, did you hear my last transmission?
Let's acknowledge. assigned approach.
Keep speed below 220 knots. Expect ILS Yankee runway tree approach by Lima Zulu transition cleared to Lima Zulu Pearson number 7787.
So we are clear to the next waypoint. They ask us to keep the speed under 220 knots. So let's adapt this. And engage. Now at that speed, as you can see on the main display, there are two little orange lines here, which means that we will have to put up level 1 flaps. So let's engage flaps 1. And as I said, we will have to make our altitude to 2,500 meters. Normally this will happen automatically, but should it not, I will already set it in the control unit, and by turning this knob I can put the altitude that I want to 2,500 meter. This is not engaged yet. To engage it I would have to push on the button, but I will only do this if the plane does not automatically descend from our next waypoint on to the one following upon that. So as you can see on the VFR map, we are almost going to make a turn left. Actually we are now above our landing strip. There is some extra information that we want from IFR. We want to know the wind magnitude and the direction. They will give it to us when we make our final approach.
Number 7787 descend and maintain 2,500 feet.
So as we read from our flight planning earlier on, from the next waypoint on we will have to descend from 5,000 feet to 2,500 feet. Let's acknowledge that instruction. I expect...
Number 7787, did you hear my last transmission?
I expect the airplane to do it
Descend
by
and maintain
autopilot
2,500 feet. Pearson number 7787.
Overspeed.
And indeed, as you can see on the altitude meter, the Airbus is automatically going to 2,500 feet.
Overspeed.
We are at overspeed. So let's put the speed lower.
Overspeed.
And engage it.
Overspeed.
I'm going to set the navigation display to arc, so that we see the line that we are following. Keep an eye on the speed, 200 knots. The altitude, we are descending to 2,500 feet. So a word on the instruments. This is actually the primary flight display where we have the attitude of our airplane, the speed and the altitude, also the descent rate. For the landing we will want to have some extra indicators. I can already engage this, the landing slope button here, that will give us a magenta arrow for our heading, and then later on a magenta arrow here to give us our descent incline. Of course, our second view here is a navigation display. We can zoom in and zoom out on it with this button, and it is set to arc which means that we see our plane following the line. Soon we'll take a left turn here. And it will be nice to have an outside view of this. Yet again, we haven't touched the stick anymore since takeoff. Everything is being done via instruments. Now autopilot will automatically take a turn left here to make our heading to the last waypoint for approach. And here we go, we make our turn for the last approach. So another word on the instrument panel. This here is actually the flight control unit. We have here the altitude selector. With this button we can change the altitude. There is actually the speed selector. This is the heading selector should we want to manually change the heading. All that can be arranged via the flight control unit. As I said earlier, we still want to know from IFR, from the radio, what is the wind speed and the wind direction at our arrival point. They should give us that information quite soon. So we are heading now to our final left turn before approach. Again, autopilot is heading us there automatically. Now, a word on speed management. You have seen that I have adapted the speed via the speed selector on the flight control unit manually. I will click on top of this button to set the speed to managed mode. That means that the autopilot will automatically adapt the speed. A way to reduce the speed is also to engage here the speed brake levers, but this is something I will not do now because I want to maintain my current speed. And as you will see on the approach, changing the flaps from position 1 all the way up to full position will also reduce speeds. We are at 200 knots now, and when we are going to touchdown we want to reach around 140 knots speeds. Runway should be here somewhere on the left. Not sure that if you can see it right now. Well, autopilot will direct our heading directly to the runway without having to touch the joystick or steer ourselves. Everything is happening by our input in the instrument panels. On the navigation display we have the constraints here in magenta. The next altitude should be 2500. Don't need those constraints anymore now, so I will disengage the constraint button, and you can see that the constraints are not visible anymore on the navigation display. Now,
number 7787, you are 8 miles southwest of Lanzarotte. Contact Lanzarotte Tower on 120.7 when inbound on the approach.
So IFR wants us
Tower
to
on 120.7 Pearson number 7787.
Tune in to the destination tower, which we'll do now. And I expect to get information now about the wind speed and the wind
Lanzarotte
direction.
Tower, Pearson number 7787, 9 miles southwest inbound ILS Yankee runway 3 approach. Pearson number 7787 Lanzarotte Tower. Cleared ILS Yankee runway tree approach. Altimeter 29.9 2 and 275 at 8.
Wind 275 at 8, so we'll enter that in the MCDU. 275 at angle 8, and we click here, and now we have here 275 at 8. So we have all the information needed for the autopilot to do our approach. And we are making our last turn. Once we are at an angle of less than 90 degrees to the approach line is here.
Pearson number 7787, please acknowledge. Cleared ILS Yankee runway tree approach Pearson number 7787.
We can now engage the approach in the computer, which is we do by clicking here. And from now on, our landing glide slope, our speed, our altitude will be managed by the plane. And there you have it in front of us. The landing runway. So I did engage approach button, and the plane is automatically aligning us with the landing strip. For our landing, we can now reduce our speed, so I'll do this by putting the flaps to position 2, and you can see directly that the speed drops under 200 knots. So we can put out our landing gear now. We will also switch the navigation landing lights on and let the people put on their seatbelt.
Pearson number 7787 cleared to land runway tree. Wind 275 at 8.
As our approach and our landing will be done mostly by the computer of the plane, we will engage the speed brake so that the plane automatically reduces speed after landing, and we will set here the auto brake.
Pearson number 7787, please acknowledge.
Let me first acknowledge that we are clear to land.
Clear to land runway tree Pearson number 7787.
And here you have the auto brake for once we landed to decelerate the plane, and we'll set it to medium. So landing gear is down. We'll bring the flaps now to full. We engaged the speed brake lever. We have set the auto brake speed. I can take over now from the autopilot and use my stick to do a landing. So I disengage the autopilot button and will now fly the plane myself. You can see the puppy lights on the left of the landing strip. 2 red, 2 white means that we are at a good speed. Now it's 3 red, we are a little bit too low. And if you look at our speed is 140, which is perfect. What I will do at the end is put thrust to idle and flare. So a bit
100
next to the runway. Put the thrust to idle
50
and now
40,
flare.
30 20 retard 5.
And we have a touchdown. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I will not taxi to the landing place.
Pearson number 7787 exit runway when able.
I hope it was instructional explain how you can navigate with IFR, the radio, and ILS, the approach, the automatic approach, everything done through the instruments. Thank you and bye bye.